You won't believe this Nintendo Switch 2 launch plan. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and that is what we're talking about today, the launch plans for Nintendo Switch 2. We have a new rumor out there from a leaker that has obtained some pretty good credibility this year, but has been saying a lot of other things recently that certainly are raising questions and having us wonder what exactly is going on. But then on top of that, we have some new financial data about the success of Switch, and also some expectations for Switch 2 that are quite shocking. And, well, if all of these things end up being true, it's certainly going to be perplexing to many people, but to me, it's very exciting. And so that's what we're getting into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And if you're unsure, watch through this video and then consider subscribing and hitting that bell. So we got some very interesting news today. The Nintendo Switch has now overtaken the PlayStation 2 in terms of hardware sales in the United States. This is according to the latest report from Circana. The total sales of the Nintendo Switch in the US now stand at 46.6 million. It is the second best-selling game system in the region, only trailing the Nintendo DS. In terms of where things currently stand, last time Nintendo updated things for us, the Switch was at 146.04 million units sold. The DS is at 154, and the PlayStation 2 is over 160 million units sold worldwide. So the Switch is chasing history here, and at least in the United States, and also Japan, the Switch has passed the PS2. Will it eventually reach the PS2 and become the greatest selling system of all time? I think there is a fantastic chance if Nintendo continues to sell a Switch for a few more years. Even if Switch 2 is coming out next year, if they still push Switch as a secondary system, as they did Nintendo 3DS for a little while, I do believe they will hit this target and the Switch will become the best-selling console of all time. But in terms of the sales conversation, this is not the only interesting thing that has just happened. Not only is the Nintendo Switch in position to potentially become the greatest selling console of all time, its successor, what we've been calling the Nintendo Switch 2, and what it actually may end up being called, the Switch 2, is expected to reach some incredibly strong numbers very early on. According to DFC Intelligence, between now and the year 2028, the video game industry market is expected to grow from 72 billion to 83 billion. And starting next year, it is expected that the Switch 2 will sell somewhere between 15 and 17 million units worldwide, but by 2028, it is expected the console will sell 80 million units. And what's interesting about that, if we look at an equivalent here, the Switch sold, as of March 31st, 2021, 84.59 million units, essentially the equivalent of by the end of 2028, especially when we consider that the Switch came out March 2017, and we're not expecting Switch 2 to come out March 2025, but maybe a little bit later, perhaps May or June. And so essentially, the expectation here is that Switch 2 sells about the same. But here's another interesting detail to note. In 2020, we went through the pandemic, and it is believed that the pandemic certainly accelerated a lot of Switch sales. So without a pandemic this time around, if the Switch 2 paces at around the same level, say for just a few handful of million, that says a lot. That says that the Switch 2 is basically pacing to do about the same as the Switch, which currently we are talking about as perhaps a console that will go on to be the best-selling console of all time, not just for Nintendo, but period. So those are the expectations for the Nintendo Switch 2. They are sky high. This is what analysts believe is what is going to happen this time around, which is very interesting because we go back to before the Switch launched, the expectations were in the opposite direction. And so with that, I think we should take into consideration that these are expectations. We do not know exactly how things will go. But what we do understand is that Switch 2 is something Nintendo's absolutely going to be pushing. This is the future of their company. It is their next generation. They focus on one platform at a time now, so it is more of an important focus than prior generations. And supposedly Nintendo has been producing many Switch 2 units getting ready. They want to have a large stock of consoles at launch. We've heard numbers between 6 to 8 million, which would be an unprecedented count. And so if Nintendo's gonna have any chance of doing this, you would think that that launch would completely blow our minds, that the day one Switch 2 launch title will be something of extreme high caliber, of extreme sales potential. Something like a new 3D Mario, something like a new Mario Kart. But rumor has it, it's not Mario Kart, and it's not 3D Mario. It's something else that might be out of this world. Which brings us to some new updates from Samus Hunter. Now, to be honest, I don't love summarizing everything a leaker's gotten right or wrong every time I talk about them. But when I don't, there are people who haven't heard the conversation before and then assume things that aren't the case. So in the case of Samus Hunter, last time we talked about them, some people said, oh, this person has a terrible track history, why would you trust them? And the fact of the matter is, we go back a few years, it was a spotty history. They were getting things right and wrong, but there was a great deal of just kind of like throwing a whole bunch of information out there, constant stuff, several things every day, and it got to a point where we should just maybe not take it so seriously. But years have passed since then. Samus Hunter has apparently cleaned up their act. And something that Samus Hunter has done in this year that no other leaker or person of any kind has done is teased 3 significant Nintendo announcements shortly before they happened, when no one else is really doing so in the moment. Samus Hunter teased shortly beforehand Xenoblade Chronicle X's announcement, the Donkey Kong Super Nintendo World Direct, and the confirmation that that weird Emio game was the next installment in the Famicom Detective Club series, a series that had been dormant for a very, very long time. And nothing else that Samus Hunter has said has yet to have been disproven, not a single thing yet. So sure, take it with a grain of salt, but at least based off what's happened in this year, we have more reason to trust Samus Hunter than really any other leaker out there. Does that mean we should trust them 100%? Absolutely not. Take it with a grain of salt, but what they're saying here is extremely interesting. So today, Samus Hunter posted this, a GIF of Shigeru Miyamoto shaking his head no. I assume suggesting that the things Samus Hunter is writing about here are not happening. Connect, chat, 3D Mario, Mario Kart. And so for those who may be confused, the conversation as of late has been, what will be the launch title? There have been these accessories going around of steering wheels for the Switch 2 Joy-Cons, which is leading people to speculate that perhaps the next Mario Kart is going to be a launch title for Switch 2. Here it looks like Samus Hunter is suggesting otherwise, and also suggesting that it's not 3D Mario either. And then there's also been discussion on what the C button might be. We've speculated that it might have something to do with connecting or chatting, and here Samus Hunter is suggesting it's not those either. But continuing, here, Patback Nitro says it was already revealed to be for the Switch 2's camera peripheral back in September. People's attention spans are short as hell. And first, just let me say, no, it was never revealed. This is a YouTuber. This is not any sort of official person. And by the way, they said things in that video that have since been proven wrong. So, yeah, what this person's saying here, I don't really agree with. But Samus Hunter responds to this person and says, no, it's not for a peripheral. So for those speculating that maybe the C button is for camera, something we might attach to the top of the Switch 2 with its extra USB-C port, according to Samus Hunter, that's not the case either. So it's not Connect, it's not Chat, it's not camera. What could it be? Simon asks, Cast, another theorized option. Samus Hunter says, no, it's not Cast either. And so if what Samus Hunter's saying is true, I feel like we essentially have no idea what the C button is at this point. But there is something else that Samus Hunter has spoken on that seems to be adding a little bit more clarity as to what's going on. We may not know what the C button is, but we might know what the Switch 2 launch title is. So here Samus Hunter says, reminder, it's more important to have constantly updated lineups each month than to have all the best games available at day one and then have months with new releases. don't worry about those two games. So here Samus Hunter is essentially saying that don't worry about Mario Kart or 3D Mario not being available day one for the console. This is more about a steady flow of games coming out month by month. But there are other things Samus Hunter said that might offer more clarity on what's going on here. Nintendo may advance the next generation Switch reveal with an announcement that could possibly come before Donkey Kong, which would be January 16th. This is to address recent leaks, especially of accessories, to ensure official news for the public. The remaining announcements of Switch games may come a little bit later. Now, we talked about this during the live stream last night. I would love for a Switch 2 teaser to happen in January of some kind. That would be wonderful, especially if it's before the 16th. But I will at least say, to hear about what's happening for the rest of the Switch 1 games in the first half, coming a little bit later, February I would assume, makes a lot of sense. But Hugo Gaming responds to Samus Hunter and asks, any hints about a Switch 2 launch game? And Samus Hunter says, it will be similar to the first Switch, but with much more third-party titles. So then, if the launch title is not going to be Mario Kart, if it's not going to be 3D Mario, but it's going to be very similar to the first Switch, but with a lot more third-party titles, what in the world would make sense? Well, it launched with some eShop titles, 1-2 Switch, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. So perhaps this time around there may also be some digital downloads available day one, a casual title from Nintendo that could have some strong evergreen success, and a hotly anticipated, hardcore, cross-generation game, similar to Breath of the Wild. And then also a whole bunch of big third-party games on top of that. What would fit this mold? Well, in terms of a casual game, we've heard from the codename leaks from Midori that there's something going on with the Switch Sports brand. I wouldn't be surprised if we see like a Switch Sports Resort as a launch title for Switch 2, or rather, as one of the launch titles for Switch 2. The other, I think, is Metroid Prime 4, based off what Samus Hunter is saying. If what Samus Hunter is saying is not true, then, I think it's probably 3D Mario or Mario Kart. But if we are to believe what Samus Hunter is saying here, I think the clear answer is Metroid Prime 4. Metroid Prime 4 is a big, hardcore Nintendo game that's been in development for a very long time. It has a big budget behind it, and Nintendo is pushing this title. It is something that is coming at the end of the generation that's been in development for many years, like Breath of the Wild during the Wii U era, and when it's coming out is the year of when the console's launching, so the opportunity for it to be a cross-generation title to bridge the gap between Switch 1 and Switch 2, similar to how Breath of the Wild bridged the gap from Wii U to Switch, it's a very similar situation in that regard. Now, many people probably doubt that Metroid Prime 4 can match up to the sales potential of Breath of the Wild, and even though I strongly believe in the ability of Metroid Prime 4 to do great things, I am very much inclined to agree that Metroid Prime 4 will not become a 30+ million selling game like Breath of the Wild. However, it doesn't need to. As Samus Hunter brought up, perhaps the plan is to just come out with big games every month. It's more about a steady flow of quality games and not necessarily a 30+ million seller day one. Because fact of the matter is, they're not going to sell 20 million copies of a Zelda game or a Mario game in the first few weeks of Switch 2, because there won't be that many Switch 2s out there. It just won't be possible. And if there are going to be this many third parties on board day one, guess what? Those third parties want to sell their games, and something like a new Mario Kart or a new 3D Mario might dwarf those sales a bit. But something like Metroid Prime 4, something that doesn't have as high of a sales expectation, can still do well, can still reach a new level for Metroid standards. Metroid Prime 4 can enter that conversation as a bigger franchise thanks to being pushed as a huge launch title, but also there could be breathing room for third parties to find some success on top of that, and if there are other things like a Switch Sports Resort in that first day, there would be minimal clash there, everything can find some good success, and if in the following months they have things like 3D Mario, Mario Kart, the next Splatoon, Animal Crossing, things like that, the Switch 2 is going to do so well and still match that expectation that financial analysts are expecting of the Switch 2. And so I know people are not going to believe these launch plans. I'm kind of thinking that this might actually be what's happening. Reminder, Next year is Mario's 40th anniversary. They're going to want to have a big Mario title for the holidays. And, similar to the 35th anniversary, the plans trickled into the beginning of the next year, so towards the end of the fiscal year by March, we saw 3D World plus Bowser's Fury release in February 2021. Nintendo may want to have another big offering then, right before the release of the Mario movie, April 2026. So Nintendo may have a strong game to close the fiscal year, as we've seen in years past. We've seen some huge releases to close the fiscal year, like Animal Crossing, for example. So what's something that can match the sales potential of something like Animal Crossing, if not surpass it? Mario Kart. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see 3D Mario be the holiday title for Switch 2 next year, and Mario Kart's actually the fiscal year closing game in March of 2026. So it's still not far off, if what I'm suggesting here is true, but it's just a little bit more spread out and a little bit further down the road. Of course, there could be other big Mario games that might fill in that first year of Switch 2, maybe like a Luigi's Mansion game, for example. There are other options, to be sure, but what I'm currently excited about is the premise of Metroid Prime 4 being the big launch title for Switch 2. What do you all think? Is this even remotely believable? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care.